All right, well today we're talking about saws and hand saws in particular. And so I got a few different varieties here for different purposes and different designs. And we'll talk about those. We'll talk about how to, so method of, and then maybe a little bit about maintenance as well. Okay, well I'm going to start with your crosscut saw. And this is probably one of your more basic hand saws. And it's used for larger material, not necessarily furniture, but maybe 2x4s and things in the old days for building houses. And so, as far as the grip goes, we're kind of like reaching in to shake a hand. Generally want a firm grip, but not so firm that our hand gets tired, because sometimes it's a bit laborious to use hand saws. I generally will point a finger too, and I just kind of try to keep that finger going straight ahead. A lot of times people have issues as far as keeping the saw this way as this way, which we'll talk more about. But that's your crosscut saw for larger material. This one looks quite the same. It's a hand saw as well, similar size, and this one's in some dire need of some maintenance. It's been a bit rusty and not used. One of the difference in this one though, this is a rip saw. So a rip saw would want to go with the grain, all right? And it's going to have a little bigger tooth and a deeper gullet to carry out some of those longer chips from that orientation to the grain. So it is important to know about grain. I didn't mention, but with the crosscut, this would be across the grain. All right, so that's what that one's for. And again, this one is for ripping, which is with the grain. Bigger teeth. Next one, which you saw me use already, is the back saw. And I generally will remember this, or have students remember this, by this rigid back here. And that's going to keep the saw nice and straight. This one is for across the grain as well, so in this orientation. And teeth are a little smaller, so this is a little lighter duty, and maybe in cabinetry and smaller material furniture and things. But that's your back saw. One that looks very much the same in design, a little different handle. This is your Dovetail saw, and very small teeth, but it does have that ridge in the back. Made to be held like this, and again, a little lighter duty. And this one, because it's made for doing joinery, is generally used on the end grain. And so, as we've mentioned, cross the grain, with the grain, and then this is the end grain. When you cut joinery for boxes and things, it's done in the end grain. And this is a nice saw for that. This is a coping saw. And so a coping saw is a very small, little thin blade. These break really easily if you don't use them correctly. And generally I hold it like this, and I work it up and down. And it's made to cut on the down stroke, all right? Which I really haven't talked about teeth of the saw too much. But this is made for curved cuts. So as you're traveling this thing up and down, you're kind of rolling your wrist, but you can't just roll your wrist without it going up and down. It has to go up and down nice and straight, and it can't do any of this. Otherwise that blade will break and you'll bind, and it'll just be kind of a nightmare. So that's your coping saw for curved cuts. This is a Japanese model, and now I'm going to talk about teeth direction, and this is called the Japanese pull saw. And so this one is going to cut on the pull stroke. So the Japanese believe that the hand's a little more accurate, and I feel like this works really well. I think they've got something going there, but this is made to cut on the back stroke as I'm pulling the saw out instead of pushing. So as I've mentioned, these other saws, these cut on the push stroke, and so as you're pushing, maybe this is happening, which gives you, binding as well, inaccuracy, and frustration. This one's got a setup, and they're, generally all a little bit different. It's very thin, but it still works good. But it's got the smaller teeth for cross-cutting on the top, and then it's got the bigger teeth with the deeper gullet at the on this side for ripping. All right, and again, pretty light duty. This would be common for furniture, again, in cabinetry. And then one of the unique things about the back saw, sometimes they'll come with a miter box. And this is kind of neat where this saw is designed to go into this box. And kind of the neat thing is this can pivot on any angle, and it will guide you perfect. All right? Because again, as we are cutting, we want to make sure that saw is going this way perfectly, all right, straight, and we don't want this to happen, okay, and we don't want this to happen. So nicely, the miter box will do that for you. Brought this one out just for fun. Generally hangs on a wall, a mantle maybe, kind of that Western look. But this is a buck saw, not used for furniture at all. This is for falling trees, and it's kind of neat. It's got teeth for cutting on the push stroke and the pull stroke, and it's also got teeth that kind of clean out the sides of the cut. Again, much deeper gullet, bigger shavings, bigger wood, and you know, sometimes they have a two-man, so a handle on each side, and I've seen also a handle here before too. All right, but pretty fun to fall trees with these. And chainsaws are fun too. This one's a bit of an antique and used for construction as well as larger material as well as smaller. And kind of neat, it's got a wooden frame. It's got a tensioner. This tension pulls this together and pushes these out and keeps it tight on this blade, and made to be, you know, used in this fashion. All right. And again, probably something you'd see more hanging on the wall somewhere as an item, you know, to observe and enjoy as opposed to use. Okay, now, so the how-to. Usually I make this look a little easier than it really is, but it just takes some practice, a few little tips. But first and foremost, we want to make sure we have a nice line to follow. So we put one on this top edge to follow, because again, we want things square. Okay, and then we also put a line on this edge, and as we enter that saw on this angle, we're going to make sure that we follow those two lines all the way out. And if we do that, we've got a really good chance of making a nice square cut. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to look at is the grip. And so again, I talked about just kind of a nice firm but not clenched up. Clenched up tends to make you tired, tends to make you inaccurate. And then I also like a pointy finger. Okay, when I get started, I like to make a little backstroke, and the backstroke makes a little spot. If you start on the push stroke, which it's cutting, it will tend to kind of skip. And so as we pull back, it's going to cut, but not like aggressive, and because it's not made to cut on the backstroke. But it will make a little dimple there, a little groove for us then when we get on that push stroke. Okay. I do like to place it on the line. I do like to think about locking my wrist here, okay, and then just letting the elbow move. I got to be kind of bent knee, kind of in an athletic position. This is like being an athlete here, and a little bent knee. And I talked about not over gripping. All right, so pull stroke, get a groove started, watching our lines, and now we just let the saw guide. We're not pushing too hard. We're almost just the weight of the saw, keeping things nice and straight. I'm cutting some teak here, which is a nice hardwood. Saw that slip. I didn't talk about material placement, but we don't want to make sure it's as flat as possible. This vise is not the best, and we want to make sure it's secure. So flat and secure. Otherwise, if the material is moving, we got no chance of making a nice square cut. I generally let the scrap fall until the very end, and then I'll try to pick it up. I'll try to hold it up as it falls out into my hand. So again, don't touch the scrap till the end. You can hear the tone of the wood change as it gets almost done. And then, you know, the true test is to put a square on there in this orientation. I should this orientation as well as this orientation, so that you can see, you know, if it's square, if you got to cut it again or not. Hopefully not. We're going to take a look at ripping. So with the grain, I don't have a good rip saw, but I'm going to try this pull saw, this Japanese pull saw. Remember, with the bigger teeth. And just kind of get it started, maintain that angle. I'm still pointing my finger, watching the line, and then I like about that angle. Keep this hand away. This is the one you generally cut. Too close. That angle right there. And again, a bit laborious, but over time we'll get there. And not to mention this teak. I probably shouldn't be using this as scrap because it dulls things really easily. So that is ripping. Dovetail saw, in grain. Again for joinery, box joinery. Still pointing my finger. Getting started. Left hand away. See my materials moving. This vise has got to go. Cutting on the end grain with a dovetail saw. And curve cuts with the coping saw. So coping saw, we got to keep traveling straight up and down. And we're going to try to roll our wrists. So we're doing two things at once. We're patting our belly. Oh, how do we do that? No, rub our belly and pat our head at the same time. So let's all practice that real quick. Okay, forward, reverse, double time. And let's see how she flies. So start on in. We've got our curve started. Saw's going up and down. Oh, my vise is in the way. Watching that line. Now I'm starting to roll my wrist. Take a little longer stroke here. Roll the wrist. Ah, there's my vise crapping out. And there you have it. Curve cut. A lot of times these curve cuts will follow, you know, with a rasp and a file, so they don't have to be perfect with the saw. They're generally addressed later with other tools. Okay, now I'm going to talk just a little bit about maintenance. And so the best thing is to take care of it. Take care of your saw and keep it sharp. We wouldn't want to drop it and nick it. We wouldn't want to bend it by any means. We wouldn't want to hit a screw or a nail or a rock. And so, you know, something really hard will damage these things really fast. And when they get dull, they just don't work good. More labor or inaccurate. And in order to sharpen this thing, it would be pretty hard for somebody to do. In fact, it's sometimes hard just to find somebody who knows how to sharpen them. So, but it is done with a triangular file. And you're going to run that file in these teeth at two different angles. So this way and this way. And then you're going to skip a tooth, and you're going to do every tooth evenly, same amount, so that it's still straight here. And then you're going to switch directions and come back the other way, and the same angles, but in the other direction. So it'd actually be over here. And so quite tedious. And then you're going to come along with this tool and produce what's called a set. And the tool is kind of like a crimper, like a pair of pliers almost. And what that does is it takes the teeth and it kind of crimps them out. And the reason that is done so that the outside edges are actually cutting. So it's not binding on the saw material itself. It's actually cutting on the outside of the kerf. And a kerf is something like that, you know, basically what the saw produces. And so the set. Okay, well, when they get to this state, rusty, they're probably still good. This is an older one and it's good metal, but we're going to need some steel wool and some oil, and we're going to have to get all that rust off, and hopefully it's not pitted too bad. As far as the sharpening, I can tell it doesn't feel too sharp, so it would need to be sharpened. Sometimes I like to take some paraffin wax and I like to wax it after I'm all done so that it kind of moves freely. It doesn't less friction as I'm sawing, so that's a good thing. A little paraffin. And then sometimes you have to tighten things up where the handle is. We've actually remade handles before. This one's kind of nice fit here. It's got a different design, but your hand really locks in. But maintenance for something like this wouldn't be easy. So again, the best thing is to take care of them and not to dull them. And a lot of times when they get dull, people just buy another one these days. But back in the old days, you'd have to learn how to sharpen this baby in order to eat, in order to make money and survive. So hope you've enjoyed the saws. I know I've covered probably more than I thought I was going to, and I hope you enjoy using them. So it is quite rewarding. Just take your time, relax, and practice.